Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Thanks for coming tonight. The purpose of our workshop and open house tonight is to present the design for the proposed City Hall building that we've been working on for the last number of months. So tonight, in addition from myself, you'll be hearing from Mike England and Lindsay Creams with Widseth, and also building official Scott Sadusky is here as well.
This TV is not on.
That TV's not on?
No.
So I can do that while we're talking. Thank you.
Just to let you know, because
Yeah, well, I can come over here and turn it on. So again, Mike England, Lindsay Creams with Widseth, and then Scott Sadusky, your building official, is here as well. And now I just killed that one. Are we really gonna do this?
here.
Try to. Let's see what happens here.
Try the button.
Yeah, you can try the button too. Oh, good. I'm not sure what's going on with this one. Well, Daniel, I'm gonna have you come up.
Wrong.
No, I
input.
know what's on with this one. Watch this. Boom. In 3, 2, 1, and woohoo! We're good. We're good to go.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me know that it wasn't on. So tonight, again, a little bit of our agenda for tonight. I'm going to walk through how we got here and what we've been talking about before, a little bit of why we're here, how we got here. And then after that, Mike and Lindsay will get up and walk in detail through the proposed design. After that, any questions council has, we can ask that right off the bat. Otherwise, I believe your intent is to take any comment from members of the public that are here on what their thoughts are. And ultimately, our goal kind of tonight is, again, get your thoughts, get any further direction you might have before we come back on February 5th for next steps. So with that, I'm just going to move right on in to kind of how we got here. So I'm going to wander over here. And by the way, just so everyone is aware, we are recording tonight. So anyone who isn't able to attend tonight will still be able to watch this presentation later. We'll get the video uploaded tomorrow. So again, as we talked to before, and I mentioned back at our last open house on November 27th, this whole process, again, it started back in the summer of 2022 when it was identified that the city didn't have a facilities plan. And myself, Chief Sandell, Public Works Supervisor Zierden, and our building official, Scott Sadusky, we just went through a walkthrough of all the buildings to kind of feel out where were we at. Again, we identified some issues with some of the other buildings, more minor. We got things into, for example, a public safety building. We upped the budget for the annual building maintenance so we can make sure we're doing things there. But the real concern came to City Hall and some of the deferred maintenance and issues we have in this building, as well as our spatial constraints. So we brought it before the City Council back last summer, and they said, let's move forward with looking at getting a facilities assessment completed. That was included in the 2020, I should say, summer of 2022. We're in 2024 now. So that was in summer of 2022. Then included in the 2023 budget was to go down this facility assessment process. So we kicked that off in January. I believe Lindsay was here at the January council meeting in 2023 to talk you through what that process is going to look like. Then in May of 2023, we held a workshop. It was on May 16th. And Widseth presented their findings of their facility, their assessment of this facility. All that documentation is on the city's website under the city projects page. Also in my memo in the packet at the very end of that memo, links to every document that's on that page is also there, so that can be found there. So they identified roughly about $750,000 estimate of deficiencies to this building. But again, acknowledging that we have some spatial constraints and concerns long term, one of the pieces of that facility assessment was to look at what are some expansion options. This is actually something that's actually not that new. During my perusing and as we were going through this process, I actually found that in 2008, the city even issued an RFP to have this very discussion and have someone come in and do a facility assessment on the building. At that point, the city council didn't move forward. I'm not exactly sure why, but from what I can tell, I think had to do with the crash, the recession. So at that point, they didn't move forward. But in 2008, it was already kind of identified that this building might not be adequate long term. So there was a couple different options that was presented to the council in May. Obviously, there was just the fix what needs to be done option. to the existing building, but no expansion. Option 2 was to fix what needs to be fixed, as well expand the building, do about a 1,400 square foot expansion to the building and kind of reorganize the entire building. That would essentially require the building be vacated, brought down to the studs, and then completely remodeled. Options 3 and 4 were iterations of a new building. That's on this board here. Essentially, what the difference between 3 and 4 was this section here of the community room and library. Option 3 was just council chambers staff space. Option 4 is council chambers staff space, community room and library. Expand on what we do have, we serve here in this city hall, where both the council chambers offers as a council chambers and a community room. Dedicate those spaces, increase the library space. At the May 16 meeting, the council's kind of consensus was options 2. Let's look further at options 2 and options 4. Option of remodel and expansion, and option of a new building with the community room and library. So from there, again, that's when we created the city project page. Shortly thereafter, once the city's new website was launched in June, we held an open house in June where we had these boards up here, these 3 boards, as well as this external rendering, invited people to come in. Myself, I was here, Daniel, Assistant Administrator Ike was here, Mike and Lindsay were here. We talked through this with people that showed up, and we gave full tours of the building. Additionally, we brought in Baker Tilly to be one of the city's municipal advisors to give us some kind of financial analysis. What could the city afford? How can different bond ratings and what could the city do financially when it came to paying for these potential building, remodel, or expansion? So then on August 1st, we came back and we had a discussion of that. Baker Tilly was here, ran you through those financials, ran you through potential bond runs, what those looked like. And then we had further discussion of, okay, here's what we've heard, here's what you've heard, what do you want to do? And at that point, the council decided to move forward with furthering a design for a new building. And then on August 7th, the council meeting on the 7th approved a contract with Woodseth initially to go into schematic design, take this design and go the next step. With a couple caveats, it was essentially option 3/4, have the community room and the library as essentially add alternates, as well as what would a community center element comprised of a gymnasium, fitness room, pool, walking track look like. So we went through that process. That did have some user groups involved to talk about what would you use in the library, what would you want to see in a community room, what would you want to see in a community center. So then on October 17th, we came back again in a workshop and presented this initial new design. Woodseth kind of went back to the table and based on what we heard, redesigned the building a little bit to better fit the uses. There was a community center element that went to the east here. So if all of these, the bottom of these boards is County Road 11, just some orientation. That went to the east. At that time, the city council discussed it, liked to see that there was a possibility of that in the future, but decided not to further pursue the community center element. So that was on October 17th, and then at your November meeting, you went and signed a full design contract with Woodseth to move into final and full design of a new city hall building comprised of the community room, library, council chambers, and staff space. So that's what we've been doing. So that was approved in November. Beginning of November, we have the design team that met pretty much weekly to work through every element, talk about what does HVAC, mechanical, electrical look like, programming of spaces, making sure we kind of got that all right. On November 27th, that's when we had that second open house where we presented this initial first design. Had about 50 people there, very, very good meeting. Presented this, fielded a lot of questions for about 75 minutes. People had questions, concerns about the process, the building, financing, etc. We listened, we took a lot of notes and heard a lot of things from that meeting. And then on December 5th, kind of gave an update, heard some more feedback from the council about this initial design. This design was a building that was essentially a 2-level building of 11,500 square feet up top and 4,000 square foot basement. The intended of the basement, that's where your mechanical would be, and the basement was designed to be unfinished for the idea of future expansion. Take some of the benefits of the topography on the land over here, potentially have a walkout, and it's just space that in the future, if the city, depending on how city growth goes, you could expand that. So in December, moving into January, we continue to work on it. What meeting was that in December? Shortly after Christmas, Woodseth, as well as Andy Picard with High Tech, was able to kind of put together an initial cost estimate for this building. At that time, construction, they were estimating to be about $4.5 million. That did not include the FF&E, that did not include design costs. We as a design team said, that's higher than we want to go. So we took a step back and we said, okay, what are ways we can cut back? What are the essential functions of this building? What are things that are additional? So that brings us to essentially the design we have that was in the packet and we have here tonight to talk about, and Lindsay and Mike are going to go through in detail. But I just want to go over the high items that's different. One of the first things is that this is now a 1-story building. So we got rid of the basement. The basement was estimated to be about $750,000. So we decided, as much of a luxury that is, it really is a luxury. And not necessarily something that's needed today. And honestly, as we looked into the future, not something that we 10, maybe even 20 years, we necessarily didn't have an identified time when we might need to finish that basement. Because this building is designed, even in its current 1-story configuration, for growth. And we'll talk a little bit about that here as Mike and Lindsay go through that. So with removing that basement, saved some cost, involved rearranging some mechanical and electrical systems. But by doing so, we were able to get rid of a staircase and an elevator shaft as well. Both had a cost, and also provided space to relocate those mechanical electrical systems. The other thing you'll see, if you go between, I'm just going to cover this up real quick, so we'll bring these back up. If you go between what was presented in November of 23, which is what we're presenting today, you'll see the exterior's changed. We received some comments that exteriors maybe seemed a little extravagant, and so we toned it down. We looked at the furnishes, we took the roof down, got rid of the big glasscape up top, kind of toned it down, brought it down. It's less of kind of in your face, a little bit of toned down building. Looked at the external finishes, toned down those as well, but maintained the internal floor plan as well. So with that, that's again how we got here. So tonight again, we're here to go through detail. I'm going to invite Mike and Lindsay up now. And there we're going to go through in detail each element of the proposed building.
Thank you, Administrator Chansky. My name is Lindsay Krenz. I'm here tonight with Woodseth to walk through the revised floor plans for the proposed new City Hall building. So this image here shows side by side the existing City Hall and the existing City Hall and the new City Hall together. So they're the same scale on the page, and we've got square footages shown. The departments are highlighted similarly, so you can kind of see visually where each of the departments and support spaces fall onto this drawing. The one thing to note, the room we're actually in right now is a multi-purpose space. So it's kind of this tan and orange overlapping color because it acts as the council chambers and also the community room space. So there's a lot of shuffling in this space that happens. So it's this multi-purpose overlapping space. So the plan for the new City Hall is to have a dedicated council chambers and a dedicated community room with separate access, allowing for the council chambers to really set up formally and stay that way, so we don't have that constant interchanging of groups of people and furniture and AV equipment. So the highlights, I think David did a really good job of explaining the differences between these buildings. the changes that we've also developed. So again, the one level facility, we still enter in basically the same direction from the west, entering into the centralized lobby space. We have the 4 quadrants of the building. Not much has changed there. City administration in the lower left-hand corner. This space didn't really change much. We did reconfigure the entry door system. Yeah, David, if you want to go to the site plan. So just because of the change in grade, so we're no longer having that lower level and the walkout capabilities, we thought adjusting the employee entrance into that administrative area made some sense, a smaller sidewalk, so they have got a dedicated entrance and exit to that space. Also, the main public walk area, we felt it was really important to maintain the design of a snow melt system through the entry sidewalk. So just the light gray areas, as you can see kind of central on the plan, those areas would be for a snow melt system. So again, a really nice maintenance item, so we prevent a lot of slipping and falling and a lot of snow and salt materials coming into the building as well. So some other changes on the site. So the monument sign, the existing monument sign that's right outside of the existing city hall, we deemed that to be really in great condition and no need to move that just slightly north on the site. So that would remain in its existing location. We are planning to repave and restripe and expand the existing parking lot that's just north of this building here to accommodate additional parking spaces, and then the new connecting drive to the public health or the public service building to the north here. We did, however, take out the patio. So outside of the library, we had proposed a patio space, which would be accessible either from the exterior or the interior of the building. The benefit of that is that's a really easy thing to come back and add at a future time. So if there's a desire to have that amenity, it can be added in. We have an exterior door out of the library, so it's still really accessible. As we look at the community room, this space is still providing access from the exterior. So when we think about large groups, catering events, community events, voting, that area is going to be really accessible from both the interior of the building and the exterior with a dedicated entrance. And then to the east of the plan, we've got an egress route. So from the council chambers, the circulation area, we've got a really nice egress route. As well as exiting the building, we added a feature. So at the last open house, we heard about making this facility be a lot more accommodating to public members that might be using the park or the trail system. And so from that egress sidewalk on the east side of the building, we can actually enter in that door and have access to the men's and women's public restrooms as well as the drinking fountains. So David's kind of hovering over a set of secure doors that we included in that hallway. So during normal business hours, those doors could be propped open, and then in the evenings, those could be closed and locked. And so people could have access through that east-facing door to those amenities, which I think is a really nice feature. During our user group meetings, we met with Joe Zierden, and he mentioned how he would prefer to have an accessible restroom for people to use at the park all hours or all seasons. So I think that was a really nice development based on the feedback we received. So if we start to go through some of the areas in a little bit more detail, actually the exterior rendering is next. So as David said, the exterior has been modified. Our original feedback that we got from the group was we really liked the developments over by the school, the clinic area, and so that kind of created these high peaked roof angles that were in the original concept. But based on the feedback we received, we really scaled back the roof angles and design of that. We took a look at several different types of roof structures, also different roof materials, so shingle roofs versus metal roofs. Everything has a budget and a maintenance impact. So it's about this balancing act and finding where the best balance is going to be. So this is where the exterior ended up today. Still different materials, really bringing in that northern Minnesota feel. That was one thing we also heard at the last open house, was really want to make this feel like we're in northern Minnesota intentionally. Another really great feature is we've talked with the gardening club, and they love the opportunity to bring the beautiful botanical gardens from the cemetery over to City Hall. And so through landscaping efforts, we'll be able to bring and incorporate those garden elements at City Hall too. And I think they've even offered to help maintain and manage that planting area. So really beautiful entry into the new building. So the next few slides here highlight different areas throughout the building, and they're paired with interior renderings. Now, the interior renderings show furniture and people as a sense of scale. This is still really flexible. We haven't really figured out a furniture package, but I think it just helps illustrate the use of those spaces. And material-wise, we keep things very neutral at this point. We haven't selected specific materials, but I think it helps just, again, illustrate the use and scale of a space. So the first area we're highlighting here is the city administrative offices. We have the large rendering in the lower right-hand corner. This is the open office area. One comment we did here is that the configuration of the cubicle furniture looked a little limiting in this configuration. Well, in today's environment, we only have the need for 4 cubicles. But we did take a look, and we'll see as we kind of slide through some additional images, on how that space could be reconfigured and to accommodate future growth without ever changing that space architecturally, which I think is really interesting to look at how the furniture can support that. With the removal of the basement, we also talked about actually the benefit of bringing the power and data to those cubicle stations overhead, which will really promote future flexibility as well. So you can see in this rendering, we're also showing filing cabinets, storage. Without the basement, we would need to accommodate storage on the main level. So we're showing a really good quantity of filing cabinets and storage capacities there. We still have the dedicated employee entrance with a little kitchenette space, so the administrative staff can just stay within their office. We're showing collaborative tables and or lunch tables in here, and also included the flex office, so that is an opportunity for growth. As we look at the renderings on the right-hand side of the page, a little bit more detail. So again, this is the rendering of the large open office space, the private meeting office, and then we have a small meeting room. So this is a really unique attribute this plan has for safety and security. So instead of inviting public members into your private office, and those conversations might get heated or contentious, we now have a small meeting room that the public can enter into and the city staff can enter into it from different rooms. And so through door security hardware, the administrative staff could pass back into the administrative office and the public has free access to the lobby. So a really nice common small meeting space for some of those conversations that would previously have happened in the hallway or in someone's private office, for example. All right, so rolling into the next slide, we'll take a look at the council chambers, but I just want to remind you to look at the overall floor plan. So if we look back at the city administrative offices, we've showed a wider range of furniture arrangements here to accommodate, again, that future growth and flexibility within the space without having to change any walls or ceilings. Council chambers, as well as the community room. So the community room, as you see, is kind of in a town hall setup in this slide, and will continue to change from image to image. So the previous image was more of just a traditional community room with tables and chairs. This was something we heard through the user group intake sessions, was the room was a little bit smaller in scale than we probably needed. So they wanted a room to comfortably plan for 75 to 100 people. So that has been accommodated with this plan as well. The council chambers room has dedicated seating, not attached to the floor, but probably will remain in the configuration that it is. We have the dais at the front of the room with a podium similar to what I'm at right now. So a standing height podium opportunity, but then also a sitting table. Sometimes those presentations like to have the options for multiple configurations. Adjacent to the council chambers, we have a large meeting room to accommodate up to 12 at the meeting table, and then additional 12 people in that meeting room as well. So if there's a need for breakout sessions or just a smaller, medium-sized meeting space, that room has been illustrated there. So these spaces would be very heavy on an AV package, but there has been a lot of conversations that the AV package that's currently in this room would accommodate the needs of that space very well. So hoping to reuse a lot of the existing equipment, the TV screens, those types of things in that space. So if we pan over to the renderings, this room is shown just from a few different angles. We have a view from the council dais desk, looking out into the audience space, a view of the large meeting room and the technology that would be provided there, and then a view from the audience looking just kind of similar to how I am here, looking at the dais with the presentation table, some nice signage on the wall, acoustic ceiling treatments. The acoustic needs of these spaces with an AV package is a little bit higher than your traditional room, so that's accounted for as well. Rolling into the next slide, we take a look at the community room. So this is kind of a split concept. I could think of this as being more of like a training room. So we have the traditional tables and chairs at the back of the room with more of the town hall facing to the east, lines of chairs on the other half of the room. This room would be accompanied with a AV screen and a technology cabinet, so presenters could have access to that technology if they needed it, but not necessarily available for everyone to use at all times. Kitchen also provided in this space. Similar to this room, a kitchen would be provided for serving of food during events. But the benefit of this room is we can actually close it down with the door. So if you're renting the community room, for example, you wouldn't necessarily need to have the kitchen component. So we've got that ability for kind of event management control. We also have added a serving window in that kitchen. So the passive food kind of in and out of that space is a lot more accommodated with a large scale window opening. And then along this wall, kind of adjacent to the serving window, is where we would plan for banquet tables for serving. So additional power needs and some furniture pieces that would accommodate more of that banquet style or buffet style serving. The image at the bottom of the screen then is just, again, kind of the split perspective of the room. So again, more of the tables and chairs, and then more of the lecture half of the room, just to show the flexibility there. This room in particular, I think a furniture package is going to be a really great asset. So tables that can actually flip vertically and then roll and nest into a very small area in the floor, as well as the chairs. The seat can flip up and then they can all kind of nest together to the side of the room. So very easily this room can be transitioned from event to event with very little physical strength or skill. These rooms are just really community focused, and so having a wide array of users be able to reconfigure that room in a short order is definitely key there with the furniture package. The next slide is the library. So this space is a little bit more straightforward. Entrance doors, we don't necessarily have a circulation desk, but lots of room for resources and storage throughout the space. We also have shown some collaborative tables, a computer desk, for example, and some soft seating. So just a really straightforward space, really flexible. We've talked a lot about this space and providing adequate power and data for future needs. So say a library in 10 years is not necessarily what the community wants to support. This could very easily convert to an open office, a large-scale meeting room. So a really good multi-purpose space. This slide, this layout here on the left actually shows what that library could look like with the large meeting room table configured in that room, just for future flexibility purposes. The community room also, we set it up for voting. So voting is something that we think of as just a few days of the year, but it's actually a really big event for municipalities. And so we've talked a lot about the flow of traffic into the building through the main lobby, into the community room at the check-in tables. We have our voting booths, the checkout table, the ballot tabulators, and then being able to exit out those dedicated community room doors. So a really nice flow of people in and out of that building. David was talking about the numbers of people that come here to vote, and it's almost in the 2000s. So a really nice setup for those particular events. This last slide here highlights the lobby. So this one, I think in particular, is really nice to see a sense of scale. It looks a little bit large on the floor plan, but when you start to see the space and how it relates in 3D, I think it lays out really nice. The transaction counter to the city administrative offices allows for up to 2 terminals, plus with ADA access in between. So anyone that would be chair-bound would have a really nice access point to that transaction counter. This area is going to get a lot of wear and tear, so a harder floor I think is really nice for long-term durability. And so we did plan for some additional acoustic treatments in the ceiling to absorb some of the click-clacky noises in those lobby spaces. With the removal of that high tower piece, we lost that west-facing window that was pouring in a lot of natural daylight to this space. So the term I like to use is borrowed daylight. So as you can see with the utilization of glass into both the library and the community room, we're kind of shining that natural daylight into this lobby space. So although it's not exterior light, we're still getting some natural illumination and the connection to the exterior. Also, this space I think would be really nice outfitted with a digital screen. So whatever is being presented in the council chambers or the community room could also be presented out here. So if there was people waiting for a certain part of a presentation, that space is really accommodating for that as well. I think that's the last slide. Awesome.
So that is the floor plan, the design. Also included, Andy Picard could not be here tonight with us, but High Tech did provide, as they promised, what they're calling a kind of a 70% cost estimate. So they went through, one of the things that was part of this stage is what called the design development package. That was provided to the council about 2 weeks ago. It is on the city website, was linked in my memo in the packet, referred to, so people could go look at that. And so that was provided to High Tech. And so they were able to go out, take that. Again, it's not full construction designs, but it kind of shows where things are located, kind of the loads for the HVAC and the mechanical and the electrical and things like that, so they can understand what's going to be in this building, dimensions of the building, etc. And then they could go to subcontractors, figure out what are they looking at cost-wise, and then also apply, again, by doing this, remember, High Tech is using Gordian. So then taking what did the subcontractors kind of give them and apply estimates from Gordian as well on what each material is. Now granted, this is not a full estimate, because for a full estimate we'd have to go into the construction designs, so then they would really know every piece of everything they would be able to do and be able to plug that in. But just so you can see really what that came down to is you've got the multiple divisions from the general requirements: site work, concrete, masonry, metals, carpentry, thermal and moisture protection, doors and windows, finishes, specialties, equipment, furnishings, mechanical, and electrical. So this bid, this 70% cost estimate of $3,892,136.53 includes everything from includes construction and what we call FF&E. So it's fixtures, furniture, and equipment. I love how Lindsay puts how she refers to FF&E. FF&E is if you took the building, put it on site, and shuck it, everything that falls out is FF&E. So if it's not fixed to the building, it's FF&E. They did incorporate that into their bid. Again, one of the benefits of using this Gordian process is that they were to be able to, at the table with us, we were able to communicate what kind of furnishings we're looking at, what our office needs. Again, have the discussion about what kind of can we use the AV equipment, what kind of AV needs we will need. So that, and again, estimate is in here as well. The one thing that this bid does not include, I should say two things this bid does not include, is one, WIDSES design costs. So there's about $280,000 left kind of in this process. So you have left in this process is the development of construction designs. the management of the whole bidding process with High Tech and Gordian, and then construction management. So they would be, in addition to Mr. Sadusky, also our eyes and ears as the architects for this project, kind of managing the general contractor and making sure everything is done to spec. About $280,000 for that. So in my memo, it comes down to about $4.2 million for construction, FF&E, and design. What that does not include down here is add alternatives. So this is something that the design team really discussed in depth. This might have been the thing we discussed in depth the most. And that is the backup, electrical backup of the building. We kind of debated back and forth, do we back the building up? Do we not back the building up? If we back the building up, is it the whole building or partial of the building? Ultimately, what was decided is to design the electrical system in a way the whole building can be backed up. What you see on the bottom of here is the cost of a generator. We put that separately, and partial that is designed, the building will be designed to be backed up, but that doesn't mean you have to back it up on day one, have the actual generator. So what you're seeing is kind of a partial building backup generator cost and a full building generator backup cost. These would be fixed natural gas generators. So if you want to do partial of the building, about $75,000 and $110,000 for a full building. These are things you could add on to it if you want them on day one, or you could build them into some kind of CIP or long-term plan to add them down the road. So that is their plan. According to Mr. Picard, he's very confident with this bid. Again, moving in the next steps, it would only get more accurate, and his feeling is that he does not see a reason why a final bid after construction documents are done would be higher than that number, unless that we as a city added something. But otherwise, he's very confident in that 70% bid. The last thing I'm just going to go on very quickly. Back in December, I produced an estimated project funding memo. I then updated that when this packet was produced. So it's pretty much the exact same thing, just with the most updated numbers regarding our capital funds and our investment funds. The bond funds really didn't change at this point. So as of January 1, we have a fund. The capital fund has a balance of just over $4.2 million, which is right about where I estimated it would be. When you anticipate in the budget for 2024, we anticipate about $800,000 in revenue to go into the capital fund, but then also about just over $1 million in expenditures coming out of the capital fund. At the end of the year, would leave us with just shy of $4 million in the capital fund. One thing I do want to point out is our fund balance policy states that the city will have a 45% fund balance at the beginning of the year. So what they do is you take what's in our general fund account, take the budget for that year, and we need to have 45% of that on January 1st. Anything between 40 and 45%. If we have more than 45%, anything over and above 45% gets transferred into the capital fund. So we haven't closed out 2023 yet. Obviously, we're still getting in some final invoices and such for 2023 are coming in. We anticipate doing that in the next couple of weeks, and then at that point, once it's all finalized, we'll be able to make that transfer. But we do expect it to be probably in the six figures, just based on the fact that we started 2023 with actually 54% fund balance. We weren't aware of that. Because of our separation with our finance and specialists at the time, until after we had the audit done, that we were at 54%. So we'll probably be back over at the end of the year with the anticipated revenues, anticipated expenditures, the end of year fund balance transfer, probably again back over $4 million again, which we talked about. So right now, again, losing a number of roughly 3.9 million. What I've been saying is that my recommendation would be not to draw down any the capital fund to less than 2.5 million. Again, as we are looking at creating a capital improvement plan, streets plan. We don't obviously want to put that number down to zero because that again helps us fund future projects without having to be doing large increases to our levy. So that would put about 1.47, 1.5 if you want to round, cash on hand to be able to use towards projects. Investments, we ended 2023 with 7.37 million in investments. We accrued just over $230,000 in interest last year, all of which goes into the capital fund. And of that 7.37, about 4.5 is unencumbered. So again, that means it's not put in a CD or we could withdraw that money today if we wanted to. Again, this is completely a council policy decision. At this point, my recommendation would not draw down more than less than 5 million. I should say less than 5 million at this time. But you could always go more if you want to. But if you go down to just 5 million investments, that provides another 2.37 million for projects. And again, as we started with bond capacity, we have roughly about $6 million in bonding capacity without increasing the levy. So what that comes down to is, again, looking at our two major projects we're working on right now between Bushman Road and City Hall. From the preliminary design you got for Bushman, the city's estimated cost on that is about $4 million. City Hall, we said today, the new cost estimate about 4.2 from what was presented. Comes down to, between those two projects, 8.2 million. Again, we estimate we have just shy of $10 million. I think once we do that fund balance transfer, I anticipate we'll be back up to that $10 million available in funding without increasing the levy. So that is where we are at. Again, the city did apply for $1.5 million through the LRIP grant process for Bushman Road. We should know that probably in April, May-ish, whether we got that money. If we do get that money, that should bring the Bushman Road project down to about 2.75 million for the city. The reason you go, well, 4.4 million minus 1.5 isn't that 2.5? But part of that would be allocated to Ideal's portion of the project based off of what percentage. So again, we are about like 87% of that project, 88% of that project. So that's why the majority of it would come to us. So if we were awarded that, again, that would bring even Bushman down more and provide us some more cushion. But just wanted to present that has been updated. If on February 5th, the council does choose to move forward with, after we have discussion tonight, if you choose to move forward into construction documents, kind of the next step with this building, the intention is to have Baker Tilly at our workshop in February to present represent bond run estimates and then talk to you about what different financing options from bonding, cash, hybrid, what that all looks like. So with that, Madam Mayor, members of the council, I think at this point where we're at is we want to hear from you, and I think you want to hear from members of the public. So whether or not you want to ask us some questions first or turn it over to those here to make any comments, ask any questions. Madam Mayor, I'm just going to turn it over to you.
All right, I do have a question. Have we looked at any of the energy efficient rebates or grants? I did have a Zoom call with Region 5's partner, Great Plains Institute last week, and I know there's a lot of money available for energy efficient construction, and so I wanted to bring that up tonight because anywhere that we can save or get rebates on anything that we design, I think that would be a smart move on our part. So have you guys looked at any of that?
Yeah, I can answer that. So we were working with BJ Allen actually on a handful of projects, and so we do intend on working with her to identify some grant opportunities, and then also what we typically do then was reach out to the local utilities and identify. Thank you, David. Identify what potential rebates are out there. So from a natural gas standpoint and electric as well. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach, but yes, we will do that, and then if we do proceed into CD's construction documents, then we'll be able to identify more definitively what the systems are and what, just more specific so we can speak more to that. But yeah, working with BJ Allen from a Region 5 side
And
of
that's
things.
who she introduced me to the partner, yeah.
Yeah, she's just phenomenal resource for that.
Right.
And so that's our plan.
Right, and she's spearheading that for our 5-county area anyway, so.
Yeah.
Historically, though, have you worked with any other projects that you've seen different types of rebates or grant opportunities within the realm of, energy efficiency and new construction?
Yeah, there is. And so we typically, the rebates that I've, not a lot of grant opportunities, but that was before I started to work with BJ this year. So all credit to her, but it's primarily been rebates through the utility companies.
Yeah.
And so that has been really the majority of what I've experienced for
Do you have
clients.
a dollar, do you have any examples of like a dollar amount or kind of what you've, not to put you on the spot or?
Yeah, that, you know what, I apologize. I wish I could throw something out
That's
there.
okay.
But
Yeah.
we did, like, for example, our large hotel project in Staples, that qualified, and so we provided information for that. We did a student housing project in Brainerd, and so the CLC Foundation was able to realize some savings there from the rebates. And so I can follow up and get you those.
Yeah.
But sorry, I can't think of those
Oh,
numbers.
that's okay. I just think it would be great, even like the trail, we approved the 800,000 grant opportunity,
Right.
for that. And anytime that we can not pull from tax dollars and
Right.
take advantage of some of the grant funding and rebates that are available, I think that would be worthwhile for the taxpayers of, from the city. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I will follow up with that, but that's our plan.
thank you.
Madam Mayor, if I may, on that energy efficiency piece, we've had some questions about, well, did you look at solar for the building? That actually was discussed at our very first meeting. Unfortunately, we didn't pursue that route, and the reason being, as we talked to WIDSEF and especially their electrical staff about it, the fact of where the solar technology is today, and then apply our climate, there really wasn't a benefit to the taxpayer for it. Especially when you look at, you have to beef up that section of roof. Solar panels are very heavy, so there's going to be additional construction of costs to being able to support it. And then you add the cost of the panels, and then you add our climate, especially in the winter, low angle sun. We'd have to make sure we're brushing them off, getting snow off of them. Is at the end of the day, any benefit that the city might experience probably would barely actually just cover the costs of the solar panels themselves. So there really wasn't a true benefit to the taxpayer and lower utility bills and things like that from the panels, and that's why we didn't pursue that.
What other options do we have besides solar panels? I know that, BJ is really she's spearheading this in the 5-county area, but it's also a new area, right? Because of the last session that came out, with all the grant funding available. So do you have other examples of ways that you can get different rebates or grant opportunities for other areas of energy efficient? Because I'm not proficient in that area of expertise.
Yeah, so the things that we've been able to do is the performance of light fixtures, also appliances, equipment, and mechanical systems. So those are the rebates and things that we can try to quantify in terms of what that return on the investment is. And so that is something. The other thing that is a little bit more difficult to try to quantify, but really, from a sustainability, energy efficiency standpoint, is the envelope itself. And so when we take a look at the type of window, what the U value or what the R value is of that window, that is something that will just make your building perform. And so if there's opportunities for that, one of the things we're working on with BJ actually is actually working with Tri-County, but it's to address things like that, like with the envelope and the windows. And so again, I always, I'm going to refer to her quite a bit in this conversation, but the things that I've experienced are more to do with mechanical, electrical, and appliances and those kinds of things. That actually, somebody in the community had raised that question last time that we had the open house, last time that you hosted that, and it's to try to quantify what that return on that investment is. And so some things are more, it's easier to do with some of the aspects of the buildings, and some of them it's a little bit more difficult, but that is something as a design team that we will definitely do on behalf of the city.
Thank you.
I've got a couple things I'd like, excuse me, David, to address. One being, since this is being recorded, the last meeting was not. With the new information today on the state statute as it pertains to putting, a new city hall on the ballot, I think you should speak briefly to that. And also, just briefly to a remodel as far as estimated construction costs, design costs, FF&E, and relocation. Again, because the residents now will have this presentation and have answers to those questions as well.
Yeah, I can do that. For what Councilmember Jensen was speaking of, at our last open house in November, there was some discussion of why doesn't the city put this on the ballot? Should this be put on the ballot that the voters decide? It's been kind of brought up in council meetings, never had a formal discussion on that. But I was able to do some research, anticipating that there might be a discussion tonight on that amongst the council. I wanted to be able to prepare and give you direction of kind of what that process could look like should you go down that process. I'll say it's a process I haven't gone down when it comes to a project like this. So that's why I wanted to make sure I can inform you of this is what the project looks like. So I decided to kind of dive into statute, look at the Secretary of State's website, who's the chief election official in the state of Minnesota. I even reached out to colleagues and the Administrative Services Director for Crow Wing County, Debbie Erickson, who runs all elections for Crow Wing County and is one of the probably most admired election officials in the state. She's very highly regarded throughout the state. And asked, so what does this process look like? Can you give me some more information? Not getting, I'm trying to piece things together from state statute and the Secretary of State's office. And when I told her that, again, Debbie's awesome and responds very quickly, very timely manner. Her initial kind of response was, it doesn't sound like that's something you could do. And she provided me more information from statute and the league. And the reason it's not something the city would be able to put on the ballot is because what this would be considered is the state would consider this, and the Attorney General and the Secretary of State's office is what they would call an advisory election. So I'll just read directly from a document that I provided the council regarding what advisory elections are, and it's talking about unauthorized elections on questions. So this full document, you can get the league, and we can post this too if the council would like, is about city special elections. I do want to state that when it talks about special elections, with what I read here, they say that this document uses special election or ballot question to describe any city election held to fill a vacancy or on a city-specific question. Special elections may be held at the same time as the general city election or state election. Alternatively, special elections may be held at other times according to state law. If the city holding the election meets the timelines and posting requirements also found in state law, city councils cannot hold special elections or questions unless authorized to do so by state law. So when it talks about a special election, even if you put a question on this November's general election ballot, that's still considered into this situation referring to as a special election because it's something that's not normal. It's not your routine council election. It's something specific. So this is what the league wrote again, and they are nice thing about the league, very thorough. Their legislative staff and their legal staff of providing backup for all of these things. So whether I read, they cite in multiple cases, Borgelt versus City of Minneapolis, Alexander versus City of Minneapolis, City of Birchwood Village versus Symes, Village of Brooklyn Center versus Ripon, and multiple other cases, and as well as state statute. So what they wrote is voters and city councils often ask about holding advisory election on controversial or politically sensitive decisions. Statutory cities can only exercise powers explicitly given or implied by the state legislature. Without specific legislative authority, cities may not hold an advisory special election. It says Minnesota courts have determined, again through these different cases, that a city council has no authority to pass their decision-making power to voters when the legislature delegates that power solely to city councils. So at the back of this document, they have three different appendices where it talks about here are the things that are required by state statute to have to get voter approval before they can happen, the number of things that the council can choose to put a question, and then number of things where by petition voters can reverse a council action. When it comes to deciding whether or not to build a city hall or a city facility, that is not a listed item. So in just on the decision whether or not should we build a city hall, should we remodel a city hall, should we do nothing, that would be considered an advisory election. So that is what I found out and was news to me as well. So that's that question. To the remodel question. Again, this goes back to what I spoke of earlier. In May, presented one of the options that the council initially wanted to look further at was that remodel expansion versus new build. And I'm actually going to pull it up here. Is back then, again, these documents are available on the city's website, linked in the packet. Widseth provided some cost estimates, very high, based off of just their preliminary designs before we'd gone into schematic design or further design of what some buildings could look like. So I'm first going to start off really quick with what we've proposed. So again, today we're looking at $4.2 million all in for a new city hall. At that time, back in November, Widseth proposed $4,011,784.20 for a new building, and actually that building was only about 7,400 square feet. So we're looking at 12,000 square feet, about 5,000 square feet more than what they proposed initially back then. But if you look at their cost estimate, one of the things that they did not list in that cost estimate was that FF&E number. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I know it's kind of hard to see, so let's zoom in here. So again, their all-in cost estimate was about $4,011,000. They broke it down, but that FF&E number was to be determined. FF&E, after working through it with Lindsay and all her wonderful interior design experience and what we might need, we anticipate it to be probably around $150,000. So once you add that to that $4 million number, you're very close to the 4.2 that we have today. So we've got arguably a larger building than what was in the concept design for roughly the same cost when you take those things into account. But going back to option 2, back in May, that was the interior model with an expansion. What they proposed was a remodel of about 4,340 square feet and then an additional 1,400 square feet. They proposed, again, without FF&E, about $1.89 million is what their estimate was without that FF&E. We did ask High Tech if they'd be comfortable kind of giving us a very soft estimate on a remodel. Obviously, that's not kind of what they initially signed on for. So we just asked them based off of, they said, well, we could do a per square foot cost estimate. So they did it based off of 6,000 square feet of a building. And their estimate was just over $1 million. But once you include FF&E, design, and relocation, you ended up, that's about $600,000. So you end up just shy of 1.7 million. One thing I realized though after the fact, after I asked Andy to give that, is as I was looking, trying to compare the numbers, I realized when Widseth did their cost estimates, they actually broke it down to remodel and addition. And I just told him 6,000 square feet of remodel, so he might have been thinking I think he was thinking just existing footprint. So if you take that into account of roughly, well, now it's 4,400 remodel, 1,600 addition, if you rounded it to 6,000 square feet, and based off of kind of the numbers that Widseth had, you end up pretty much right at this 1.9 million dollar number. So their very soft estimate is pretty much right on with what Widseth had when you add the FF&E design and relocation costs. Now with that, with a remodel, I would say if you chose to kind of reverse course and go down that route, 1.9 million, I would say plan at least 2, because with the remodels, there's always things that you can't anticipate, especially for the fact that we've hunted, we've even tracked down the gentleman that designed this building, and Daniel had a great 45-minute conversation with him, and we have no as-bills for this building from 1995. We even asked him, do you happen to have those? To which he said, absolutely not. So there is a little bit of a kind of flying blind when it comes to remodel for this building. So that's, I would say, anticipate there's going to be change orders. So that's where we're kind of at on the remodel cost. Just for the cost, again, as the council's discussed before, I won't go beleaguer it, but one of the biggest defects of remodel is the fact that you do have to vacate the building. So does that cover everything you were hoping for, Councilmember Jensen?
Yeah, thank you. I do think too that document regarding putting it to a vote should be posted on the website. Residents should have access to it.
And also too, I think that, obviously we do hear a lot of things on social media. One of the things that was floating around was that we would still be paying for the $1 million in the remodel if we built new. So I think that there should be, we should also address that in the fact that, no, we would not be planning for tax dollars to go towards, paying for the remodel, but that a potential tenant would pay for that remodel. So again, there's definitely miscommunication on social media. And I think that we need to make sure that we are addressing that specifically, that no, we're not choosing a remodel and to pay $1 million new build and $1 million for remodel.
Yes, Madam Mayor, as I think I said back in November, I think the goal would be, if the council moves forward to build this new building, would be to hopefully try to find a new tenant for this building. Obviously, my recommendation will always be don't sell this building, just because it, especially when you look at the kind of campus we've built here, having a privately owned building in amongst all these public spaces would be very disruptive. And when I've seen cities try to do that, mix public and private, it doesn't go well. But try to find a use of a tenant. City states maintains ownership, someone who, uses this building. I think the idea what the council's kind of discussed, very high level in the past would be something that I think is some kind of service to the community, not just putting a random business here. But then doing something where, trying to figure it out where, through grants or just the tenant would be bearing that cost to upgrade the building as they would need, depending on what their needs are. Any future questions about what that may be, obviously that's what Mr. Sadusky is here to talk about. When it comes to remodeling, he's that expert on the building code and how, not just what happens when you start moving walls and fixtures, but also what happens when you just change the occupancy use of a building. So if you have any questions on that, that's what Mr. Sadusky is here for.
And I think too, I just want to, I think a lot of people who, just were that communication on social media or word of mouth, is just looking at costs, like side by side, right? You're just looking at the remodel cost versus the new build cost. And I think that I understand where people's perception of, cost alone, but you have to look at the other factors, which I think that we are looking at, right? Where there isn't a lot of opportunity for the city to generate additional revenue. This could be it, right? This could be our opportunity to have additional revenue from this building once a new building is set. I think there's a lot of value in that long-term for the city. So that is one factor, right? So I think there is a lot of things that we look at systematically on why one choice is better than the other, and it doesn't just necessarily come down to the cost of it. So I think those are definitely important conversations to have. I also, we've heard about, okay, well, here's how many times a year that this building is rented out in, I think it was like 10, what did you say it was?
Not very much.
Yeah, but, if you looked at it from the perspective of a brand-new building, how many more people would you have rent out this building, right? Would you have more residents? Would you have people throwing birthday parties in a new building? Would you have people having more meetings in a new building? So I think that not necessarily looking at the numbers, what we currently have here, but could those numbers exponentially grow as services to the community, an opportunity for the community to utilize this building more so than the building is done today? So again, I think the another important conversation is not just 2 million versus 4, but it's also, what are these other opportunities that are available to our community on top of the fact of generating additional revenue. So I just want to keep that on the table because I don't think that we should just solely discuss costs, because I think that that's not looking at the future growth and the needs of the residents that we serve.
Lindsay, can you clarify, you had mentioned when you were going over the new city hall, this snow melt maintenance system. Just can you go over a little bit more as to what exactly is that? And do you have an idea as to an estimated cost?
I'll do my best as an interior designer and not a mechanical engineer to answer your question, but we certainly can follow up with you. So a lot of our public clients are realizing that there's a huge liability to our slip sidewalks. And so there is a snow melt system. It's a very small boiler system that's located within the building. And then there's a in-floor heat system that's extended out into the sidewalk to keep the sidewalk at an ambient temperature that will not allow for the accumulation of snow and ice to build up. So you have the slip prevention built into your system, as well as then we're not bringing in salt and sand into our buildings, which then deteriorate the floor conditions throughout the whole facility. I can't really speak to the cost. Do you remember what Adam had estimated that at?
I want to say it was in like the 50 range.
Okay, that's where my thought was too, around the $50,000 range. Originally, that was just part of the entire boiler system when the mechanical system was located in the basement. But with the reduction of the basement, the design committee thought the priority of keeping that snow melt system was important. So a small boiler system would be located in the entry vestibule mechanical space. And so it's a very short run for tubing and piping. So that's just kind of a closed system that would be accommodating that snow melt.
And I'll just add to part of the discussion beyond that liability of, you don't risk the falls because there's no ice forming in that system, is also the benefit of that labor piece of right now what happens when we have a snow event, the Public Works Department is out plowing, someone has to then come off their route, shovel out City Hall prior to us opening, and then go back out on their route. So there's that benefit of they won't have to come off their route to shovel. They can just keep maintaining what they're doing.
I have another question. I think this would be for Scott, but there's been suggestions that, why can't we use the existing city hall if it is a new build for the community room? But this is dual occupancy, and if we do build a new city hall, can you still use this area as a community room? Is there any ordinance or code preventing that?
No, not technically.
Yes, Scott.
Yeah, you'll have to.
Speaking of going back to the snow melt, that's really common on commercial properties now. It shuts off automatically when the temperature outside is 50, so it doesn't run, but it's hard pressed to find a lot of, especially in the medical field, they have it on all their sidewalks like that, save on labor of shoveling and so on and so forth. So it's a little bit difficult to answer some of the questions on the existing property as is. There was no plans. There is no architectural plans per se. And we do have an architect in the room, and I honestly look at this as an A assembly already, where it is shaded the orange and tan, whatever that is. I would assume that that is an A assembly, and I would think that would be grandfathered in, would be working more in the conservation code if we were doing alterations with this. The other thing I think the council should think about, building is all the windows are gonna need to get replaced very soon. The doors need to get replaced. It's not a very good accessible route to get into this building, and so on and so forth. So some of the items that we are updating, you are gonna have to update other items also. I mean, since the time I've been here, since 2006, we took out the partitions in the bathrooms and the additional toilets and urinals to make it accessible. And this building to me was built when this town was under 2,000 people. It was more of a village and it was just becoming into a city. It seems like now that we are a city, it kind of reminds me of a family that has 5 kids in a 3-bedroom house. It's like, can you add on to your house? Yeah, but where's your cost effective factor? And that's the tough decision you guys have, that you got to decide where's your money best spent. But there's going to be some upkeep on this building regardless what you do with it. That's going to have to be done.
Hey, Scott, to further expound, I think Councilmember Jensen's question. So obviously you're saying this space would be kind of a grandfathered A occupancy, assembly occupancy.
An A3 occupancy,
If
which is
we-
different from.
If we vacate the building and potentially use the current staff space for further, to expand those community aspects into the current staff space, how does that alter the use of this building or what the city can do with this building?
That would be considered a B occupancy. So if you had an attorney move in here or a business that provides services, B occupancies would be an attorney, accountant, something to that nature where you do have some public in here. It doesn't mean all businesses. It's not a mercantile, like if you were to sell items in here and stuff, that's a change of occupancy at that point. If you were to put a restaurant in here, that's a change of occupancy at that point. If you were to put a restaurant in here, for example, you'd have to sprinkle it. That would be, there's just part of the downfalls of it.
So if we wanted to use this community room, it's as is, you don't touch, you don't remodel anything to keep the occupancy grandfathered?
I think I definitely could make the argument, if we left this as a community room, that I would consider this an A3 occupancy. And that's what, frankly, that's what it is.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So we wouldn't have to do anything. We could leave it as is, not touch a single thing and let it run for a while?
Yeah, I mean, if you're not changing the use, I mean, obviously you gotta do upkeep, but if you're not changing the use, it's all grandfathered in. It's not because you vacate, does it have to be updated?
But we'd still be updating like windows and things like that.
Correct.
Roofing.
You're gonna have to do windows. I mean, we got cracked windows in here and so on and so forth.
So we would still be on the hook for those updates versus if we had another occupant in here, they could potentially pay for those. And that's kind of where I see where you're going, because I think where you were asking was if we didn't do the community room over there, we didn't do the library over there, which initially we had that plan in the beginning, and then we heard feedback from residents that they wanted the community room in the library. So where you were going with that, I understand.
Yeah, the community room is $812,500. The library is $227,500. So grand total of $1,040,000.
Yeah, I think my concern with that, though, is even if we went that route and this was stayed the same, that doesn't take away the fact that there's still $1 million in upgrades that we would have to do. And that, instead of the $1 million going into a new facility, we would have to put into an old facility. So I think it would, in my opinion, it would make more sense to put that into the new building and have someone else pay for those upgrades here.
I guess the question is, what do you absolutely have to do? I mean, do you need to replace all windows? Do you need to replace
Yeah.
2 windows? That's...
And that's the problem with remodel, right? Is that there's so many unknowns, and like there have been so many times in my experience with remodels that we spend way more money on it than we initially anticipated, because you just don't know what you're going to get when you open the walls. And so I think that that's kind of that's really where we shifted, I think, initially from, that new build. And again, I think there's so many different factors. There's unknowns, right? We have to make decisions based on unknowns. You weigh the costs and the risks and, the benefits. And I think that that's where, that's what we really have to look at.
As being a former renovator, I always say it's like getting a Christmas present from your crazy aunt. It might be the best present you ever got, and it might be the worst. You don't know. The one thing that I have concerned on this building is this building was done by volunteers. There was not architectural drawings. It was built like a home, frankly, and you can tell. And I think that's why we're having the issues that we're having. But what my overall concern for this thing is we just don't know until we open it up. And we might find, like for example, there's a double foundation around here because when they initially built and did the block work, it wasn't big enough. So they did another they didn't collapse that one. They just moved it and attached onto the foundation from the corners. I mean, that's from my time talking with Tim Polipnik. He was telling me about that. But I mean, I just don't know what you're going to get into when you really open this up. And it's extremely common that if you get a commercial tenant, let's say, that they build to suit. And then you build once you have that, when you know the needs of that client.
That's what they're doing at the clinic. I mean, with adding on to the clinic, I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, CRMC is paying for that build. And I mean, I think, again, that's really the driving factor for me is being able to say, okay, this building, can we keep it, own it, generate additional revenue, and not have to pay to renovate it? That would be the absolute ideal situation for the city of Breezy. And that's just my opinion. But I've kind of always held that opinion because it's all encompassing, right? It's not just like this cost versus this cost. We have to look at every factor and look at 10 years from now, because I don't want someone 10 years from now be like, oh, that council was really not smart for spending X amount of dollars when they could have had a brand new building that would have served us for 20 years without any, renovation to it. I mean, so I think that that's...
Yeah, and it just seems like, I've been here almost 18 years, and it seems like this has been a discussion off and on since I've been here, that they've always wanted to expand, and then obviously our community's gotten a lot larger since I started, and I can understand where you're having it's tough to decide. This is not an easy decision.
Well, especially again, when I feel, and I think a little bit to what Steve's point is getting at, we don't really know for in fact what bringing this facility up to code, right? Addressing the existing maintenance issues actually costs. I mean, we're working off of estimates, we're working off of best guess and certain assumptions, but we truly don't know. We haven't spent the time really having perhaps yourself along with a contractor starting to look into this building as though this is going to be remodeled, right? What are we likely going to encounter? I brought it up before. I mean, that's where my comfort level is going to be going forward. That we take a closer look at this existing building and know within a degree of certainty, what is it truly going to cost? Well, because part of that, right, I mean, I think is what you're getting at. We're going to have an investment in this building, regardless of whether our new city hall gets built or not.
That's 100% truth.
Right.
It's just how much you want to invest in it before you get a tenant, let's say. That would be, and then you don't know what the code issues are going to be until you get a tenant to know what the use of the building is. I will tell you this, just in my cost estimates of what I've seen throughout the 9 communities I serve, I'm very surprised at the cost of the new. That's extremely reasonable from what I've seen out there for the new city hall. I mean, you're bordering somewhere around 300 a square foot. That's pretty cheap. Most of the stuff I've seen has been about 400 to 450. The remodel costs, it just depends what you want to do for remodeling. I mean, you can say remodel costs are just replacing the windows and you're all done, you know? But then you still have the same problems that you have now. So I don't think anybody's trying to be evasive. They just don't know to what extent do you want to remodel it to. If you had a concrete plan and you had Mike design it and Lindsay design it and say, this is what we're doing, then I think you could get a concrete plan.
Right, but I guess for some reason, we're not even able to get there. So,
I'll kind of go back to, our first workshop that we had. We all, saw the options, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I believe it was all 5 of us that we concluded that, at minimum, the expansion needed to be done. I hope I'm not misspeaking, but I think all 5 of us included that minimum option 2 was the necessary thing. And that's why we looked at 2 and 4. And so when we came back to the second workshop that I know you weren't able to attend to, we talked about the pros, the cons for each of those different variations. And in the ultimate decision, we outlined that we thought that the building of new, the pros outweighed all the cons. And we talked about there's pros for the cheaper side of doing the remodel, but the cons were outweighing them on relooking at the total new build. And so when we came down to the decision of should we move forward with the final design, I believe at that point it was a 3-2 vote to move forward with the new design build. I believe that the 2 that weren't was because of the high tech and the Gorian issue. But that's when we move forward with getting this final design aspect. And again, we hashed out those pros and cons, things that we mentioned here tonight about what are we going to see when we open up a residential volunteer built home. Back then it might have been built very nicely because hand done and volunteers, we might see some good things, but we might see a lot of negative things. And so that's where we kind of conclude with a lot of discussions.
And I will say, do you think that with the reasonableness of the new build, I mean, I was blown away by the Gordian process. I knew that by state statute, typically when you go out for bid, that cities are required to basically choose the lowest cost. And we all know with change orders and everything else, that is not necessarily the number that you land on, more times than not. I mean, and it can be significant. So when, that Gordian process came in with, having the builder involved early on in the design phase, do you think that is a contributing factor to the reasonability of the new build? And have you worked with other buildings that have gone through the process?
I've worked with Gordian through Sourcewell when they expanded 30,000 square feet. And it's funny because a lot of the conversation you guys are having is kind of similar to what they had. And I actually have a friend who works for that company, but I haven't reached out to him or anything like that because I just, didn't want to taint the water, so to speak. But how it's, it could be that high tech's getting slower, or it could be that
Mitch likes us. I don't know.
it could be that they like working in Breezy Point. I can't answer those questions. Could be because of who the building official is. For all
there you go. It could be that.
So I can tell you this by just doing the quick math in my head. I was a little surprised on the square footage and the final cost. It's a little surprising.
Are you willing to taint the waters and give us your expert opinion on what you would decide if you were in our position?
No. I've been here almost 18 years because I don't have opinion on that stuff.
After the meeting?
That's the right answer, Scott.
Yeah, I know.
The only thing I'll say, it does remind me of a family that has a 3-bedroom home with 5 children. What do you do? Do you expand, or do you buy a new home, or do you, it's tough. I mean, I'm glad I'm not you guys, to be honest with you.
but the Gordian process doesn't eliminate cost overruns and change orders at all, in your experience, does it?
It did. They kind of hit their number, and the one time I've had it, Brad, they hit the number at Sourcewell, but I don't know, maybe that number was inflated to begin with. I don't know that for a fact. I don't have enough experience with one building, and of all the buildings I've done, that's done. The only thing I will say is it was the contractors, the subs and stuff, they found it a little bit frustrating to work with because they thought the numbers were lower than what they should have been. But yeah,
Therein lies in my experience, because this is part of what I do for a living too, is build, oversee, project manage multi-million-dollar buildings. I have not ever seen in my experience a building come in at or below budget. Never seen it. Not to say it doesn't happen.
no, the
I just
last
haven't
one that I know of was Hoover Dam that came in before time and under budget. So, but I mean, with that being said, let's say it does go 250,000 over budget. That's still, you're paying, let's say 3 1/4 square foot.
That's
You know,
good.
that's cheap.
For commercial, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm shocked it's under $400 a square foot.
But it's still $2 million, arguably more than what a remodel and an addition would be.
I'm
Right.
not saying
Yeah.
that. No, that's 100% agree. 2 million and 4 million is a big difference.
Does anyone else have any questions for him?
Yeah, and a lot of the code stuff, again, no one's trying to be evasive here or anything, but we won't know until you get a tenant if that's the route you go. And if we're gonna remodel City Hall, we're not gonna really know. No one's got x-ray eyes to look in the walls to see what they did. The only thing I will tell you is this is built like a home. It's not built like a commercial building. And you just don't know until you know. It might be fine.
Especially water. I mean, water is a huge issue.
Yeah.
A lot of times what you can find behind walls from water draining down has actually been probably one of the highest remodel costs that I have seen in older buildings. Mold or anything. I mean, there's a lot of things behind those walls that you just do not know until you open it up.
I know this, my good friend George Buchan, who has since passed away, helped build this building, and I helped work on a few fish houses with him. Does make me a little nervous to see what's got in there. He was, let's get her done type of guy, so.
Well, we appreciate you coming.
Yeah.
And giving us your
And
opinion.
if you guys got any further questions, just let me know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I think, should we open it up to public comment? All right, we'll go ahead and open up. So if anyone wants to come up, name, address, and let us know what you think. Have any questions?
Hello, Gail Arney, 32692 Northwood Circle. I just want to say I've been following the process, and I think you guys have really made good decisions on where we're at today. I think it's very well thought through and covered a lot of different aspects that people had questions about and put input in for, and I feel like you've been listening. And I think it looks like a really good plan for the new building. Second thing, I think there is possibility for solar as far as maybe an array. I was talking to Candace Zimmerman from District 5, and she said it doesn't have to be on the building to be, with the weight factor and all that, that it could be a separate standing piece. And so there might be a possibility of that if the wiring's done properly. And that could be done at a later date and budgeted for. And it could be over maybe by the police building or whatever, and the fire. So that's just something to keep in mind as another, because I know a couple churches in town, in Cross Lake, have panels, and they are on their building, but it doesn't have to be. They're saving a lot of money. They're actually getting paid back for their solar. And the third thing was just that this building, I think it could be, if you don't find a tenant that is willing to put a bunch of money into this building and then just rent it from us, I'm a little skeptical that might happen, that we consider possibly using this as a rec center and use it Like he said, it's still possible to use it if that's for community use, for the public, because there's not a lot of places, and we're not doing a community center for many years probably, like we would like to, like our dream community center, so we could get some aspects of that into this space, I think. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. Mr. Chansky, anything else for us?
Okay, so I think that's all we had from you, unless there's, so the next steps, just so you're aware, is at your next meeting on February 5th. At this stage, unless the council wants to give us some other kind of direction to bring you something else on February 5th, would be, I think Mike and Lindsay will be back in 2 weeks, and we'll be talking about moving into construction documents and then bidding. So that's kind of what next steps would be, unless the council wants us to alter course in any way, bring an alternative. I guess I haven't heard anything specific tonight that would suggest otherwise, to go another route. But that's where I guess tonight we'd be looking at, if you want us to bring you something else in February, now is kind of that time to let us know. Otherwise, what we'll be bringing in February is to move into construction documents and bidding.
I think the only thing that I would like to see is a follow-up tomorrow on social media as far as like communications. So making sure that we post the information from the League of Minnesota Cities about the statute, not allowing for a citywide vote for a project like this. I think that's important. I think that's been probably the biggest pushback, besides cost, and maybe just a follow-up. I don't know if you have anything else that you would like to see communicated to the residents.
No, not at this time.
I think for myself, it might be nice to just see those remodel designs again, like the kind of just review that as well. I don't know, I kind of go back and forth, honestly, like it was remodel and then it was new, and now I'm kind of starting to go the other way a little bit. So honestly, it's hard for me to decide what is best, especially with the pared down design, even with the additional square footage. That sort of makes me wonder if just a remodel makes sense if we're just going to pare it down that much. And the cost isn't that much less. I mean, it's less, and I'm saying not much when it's like $1 million, but it's still not significantly less. So I think that would be helpful to me if we're supposed to make a decision as far as to move forward with construction documents on a new build or not, just to kind of revisit what a remodel would look like. I don't know if that's feasible by then, but.
Just kind of following up, just to make sure we provide maybe information that you're looking for. So obviously, the only designs we've had were from the preliminary, so which we can bring back, which we have here, and we'll just bring back maybe as part of the packet. We can formalize that cost estimate that I received earlier today from High Tech. And then I think the only other thing, Mike and Lindsay, when it comes to, obviously if the council does choose to kind of alter course and go remodel route instead of new build route, we kind of have to restart design process. So I don't know, Mike and Lindsay, if you're comfortable talking about it now, what that looks like. Is it pretty much exactly what we did before, or do you see remodel process different from new build process?
That's a good question. David, I really appreciate your chronological order of the presentation boards over here, and I encourage everyone to kind of take a look at them. They're all dated, which is really nice, so we can kind of reference back to the process that we've gone through. The initial concepts that were presented in June of 23 were just a starting point. And so you can see a lot of evolution has taken place through the design process. We've met with key stakeholders, we've had user group meetings, and a lot of design team meetings to talk about all of the details and attributes of the plan. So on the far right-hand side, we do have the remodel plan of City Hall. So that's the existing City Hall building remodeled with addition additional square footage onto that building. Now, again, that was from June of '23, so that was done just from our intuition and just hearing preliminary the information. So I would encourage, if we were to go back to that remodel concept, that we follow a similar process that we've done thus far. So I believe schematic design was presented in November, October, thank you. And so we got through design developments in December, the end of December. So I would encourage a remodel process go similar to that. Although we do have a concept here on paper and I would think a vetted cost estimate at this point from our team and the high-tech team, understanding what that means from you all, the users, and key stakeholders to input to that plan. I think we would continue to see that kind of morph and change of design. So that would be my recommendation.
Okay, that's helpful, because you could see, I suppose, the layout change and then potentially a square footage increase or decrease based on that.
That's exactly what happened with the new build. We kind of had a preliminary design, the floor plan. Once we kind of got that direction of, hey, we want to look at new build, then we took a further look at it, just as Lindsay said, and refined it over time. So we would probably need to do the exact same thing with a remodel, is go all the way back and then go, okay, what are the goals of the remodel? What are we hoping for? And then is that preliminary design still accurate? How would we change it? And kind of go through the exact same process as we did for the new building.
That's correct.
Would we be able to get a cost to do something like that at the next council meeting? I know that's very short notice.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to go back to the remodel, it was a three-prong approach. So we needed to address the facility deficiencies, the deferred maintenance. So windows, any siding repair, deck work, all of those deferred maintenance items that were addressed in the facility assessment. Number two was any code and accessibility issues. We needed to bring those up to today's standard. So that's heavy-duty bathroom remodels, door access, hardware, all of those things. And then number three was the space constraints. So as City Hall sits today, you're overflowing, I think, to put it lightly, from a staff perspective. There's no room for growth. There's no room for summer interns. And so the remodel plan takes all three of those different buckets into consideration. So just as kind of a reminder.
There was one thing I heard tonight that we had not heard before, but I've had meetings since. And you had mentioned that the new design incorporated like a stopping point for trail, like for people within trails. And I kind of wanted to like just share this with the council. So I had met with Mike O'Connell, who runs a nonprofit in Cross Lake. We will be setting up a meeting with Dave Peterson from Ideal Township. There are opportunities to enhance the connectivity for the trail system. So if we're able to potentially do some kind of trail system in the future that would connect Cross Lake to Breezy to Paul Bunyan, what that allows for is much larger grant funding. So if that were to actually come to fruition through over the course of however many the next 10 years or 50, however long that would be, we have to then consider that as we're looking at what kind of space can we accommodate if Breezy Point is a stopping destination for people on bikes or runners or anything else within that connectivity. So again, I do think that we have to really look at not just is this a remodel or a new build, but what does the future of, this area within Breezy Point look like in 10 to 15 years? And I think that that is so important. And when we look at vision and what does that look like, can a remodel handle that, right? And then if it can't handle that flow of traffic that could potentially be brought to our city from Cross Lake, from Ideal Township to Paul Bunyan, from Paul Bunyan to Cross Lake, I mean, that could truly be something that would be, something to look at as we grow as a city and as we grow in that connectivity. So I really don't, it's hard to bring in those kind of conversations when they're just in preliminary as far as like meeting, but this is what you have to do in order to really plan for the future. And I think that that's something that we should really consider. Does anyone else have any other questions? All right.
Okay, with that, Madam Mayor, members of the council, there's not anything else you have. That is what we had for you this evening. I want to thank you all for being here, those members of the public that took their time out of their schedules to come and participate. Again, we are recording this meeting, and we are intent we'll hopefully have the recording up sometime tomorrow.
All right. Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming. It's under 2 hours, so I hope you're happy.